Yeah. So let's start where you are in this. I can just ramble on, and then that will be fun. But I think it's good to have a little bit more background info on what is it that you'd like to learn, or what you're looking for.
So because of the role that I play in the world, I guess, like I often have people coming to me looking for advice or clarity, you know, like they're sort of like, oh, I think I don't know what I want, but I know it's in that direction, and you seem to know about that thing a bit. Can you help me figure it out? So I have a lot. If I actually put a lot of energy into pushing people away and saying, like, I'm too busy. Please leave my calendar alone so that I can get on with my work. But if I took those breaks off, I would have a conversation with someone every day easily, with someone that wants to talk about. It could be anything from digital democracy at the global scale to what's happening in organizations. How do we do a different approach to collaboration? Like, can we work without a traditional hierarchy? To community building work. There's a lot of related overlapping topics that people come to me for. I keep pushing them away. And when I do let them in, I love it. Like, I get so much energy and so much excitement from hearing from people in different parts of the world, doing their different part of the system. And I often feel like I can give them something really useful, which is like enthusiastic encouragement for their inquiry and their journey, and just like, yeah, this, you're onto something, this is good, you should go for it. And often they don't have much of that support around them. I'm reasonably good at listening and just paying attention and tracking what they're saying and asking questions. I have a natural tendency to challenge people's assumptions. This is actually something that I want to be more intentional around, is like how to question people's assumptions in a gentle way without like just kind of, I don't want to disturb people, you know, and like introduce this chaos into their life when what they need is like a gradual process. And I think I can be a little bit psychedelic without consent. So I've got some pieces that are kind of clear. I mean, one of the other pieces that I really love is like, I love giving advice. Like, and I know it's not always that helpful, but I recognize a lot the patterns of group dynamics. And so I've often got something to offer someone that's got a challenge. And then the other piece that I love is my brain is like a library, an encyclopedia of all these different weird domains of knowledge. And so when someone comes to me, I usually have a whole filing cabinet of people and links. And most conversations end with me sending them an email, which is like, here's 10 things you need to read, and here's 5 people I'll introduce you to. So all of that feels valuable. And it's like, I've been basically exploring in the last couple of months. Can I get paid to do that so that I don't have to say no to people all the time? But that I can just find a business model so that's sustainable. So I've been doing a bit of that, and then working with a few clients and feeling the limitations of just proceeding completely improvised by feel with no formal understanding of what I'm trying to achieve and no formal knowledge system that guides me, like, what are good questions to answer? What actually is my role here? What do people need? So I started to feel this sense of like, it would be good to know how other coaches do it. What makes a great coach, and what skills particularly do I want to learn?
Okay, cool. That's great to have some more context. I'll just share my screen because I made some slides.
Oh, nice.
I I had those lying around, and I figured this is good. So let me work technology here. And I think I'm sharing, right? So I go to presentation mode, and then all right. So basically, what I did, just as a little background, was a lot of nonviolent communication. I started giving workshops on that, and helping people with that. But at the same time, I want to do this at the company, at like a professional context. And I felt like really improvising and struggling how to fit in the emotional intelligence, feelings and needs stuff with people at work, struggling with other stuff. So I did this 1-year course in professional coaching, and they gave me some of the basics, which like, yeah, this is so obvious. Like, my God, by knowing this, I can like tenfold increase my effectiveness. Yeah. And they're just really simple things. So I was really happy with this course. And I can give you like a brief overview of that. Mm-hmm. And see where it fits in. And this course was kind of based on this framework, which they call the 5 critical success factors of coaching. And these factors, you can use them in preparation to think about which ones need most attention. You can use them during conversation to kind of like, hey, this is not working well, should I correct? And afterwards to kind of evaluate like, hey, how did I do? What went well? But first, so coaching is a bit of an ambiguous term because it's used by a lot of people. You have like the sports coach, instructing people how to do a sport. You have professional coach, life coaching. So the thing I learned is like coaching always starts with a learning question, which is different from a performance question. Mm-hmm. It's not like about how do I hit this many sales a year. It's like, how do I learn to evolve my business model to do this? Or how do I... and in your case, I think I would be, how can I have more structure in my conversation to do it as a living or get paid for it? Mm-hmm. And so somebody comes to you, and the first thing you want to do is always start with a learning question. Because if you don't have a question, it can be a very good conversation. It can be, have depth, have intellect, have emotional support, but there's no kind of direction in it. And then the job of the coach is, as I learned it, to strengthen the learning ability of the coachee. So in a way, you're boosting the already existing learning capacity. And there are 2 ways to do this. You can do this as a job, and then you're guiding a learning journey for people's growth. And it may include training, teaching, mentoring, coaching. And of course, if you're teaching, you have some expertise which you're actually dropping at the other person, like, here's how you do it. And this is appropriate if the learning journey requires, like if it's really a newbie, you don't just go there like figure it out for yourself. You actually give some kind of demonstration or support. So that's the job of coaching. You also have the skill of coaching, and which is actually like a conversation skill, in which you help the coachee find his own answers. And it's often done by asking skillful questions, but it can also involve some exercises, or, everybody has this kind of container of exercises you can use. So I've trained in nonviolent communication. I have a lot of exercises in that. Yeah, you might have different knowledge and skills, and that's all valid, but it's really exercises and questions that you use in conversation to have people find their own answers. So this is the basic, and then you get these 5 factors. The first one we have to think about is the context, which means there's this tendency for a coach to go like full psychoanalytic mode. Like, what does it say about you? What are your limiting thoughts? But of course, every problem exists in a certain context of the world. So the example could be, if I have a flat tire on my bike, I could say, I fix it, fix the tire. I could also think, what caused this? Well, maybe I was, running across some nails. Okay, why was that? Maybe I was drunk because I had a party. Why was that? Well, perhaps I was feeling miserable and needed to drink to forget some issues. Well, you can get bigger and bigger, both in myself, but also in the world. And you can apply a little bit systems thinking here. Like a common one is, a manager complains, my employees are lazy, they don't take responsibility. And and there's often an interaction. Like, the more he tells them what to do, the less they lean back, and the more they lean back, the more he tells them what to do. So this kind of thinking is nice to have as a coach, to really figure out what's the environment here and what's the interaction with it. The second one is the scale. like you need to have some measurement of where you're going. It doesn't need to be an end goal, can be, but you need to have some direction. Otherwise, it's just a good conversation, and there's no way to to know that you did a good job. If you don't know what the person is trying to accomplish, how are you going to know as a coach that you help this person learn this stuff? And you often see this early on in the conversation. So you could say, by me opening this conversation, I ask a bit about the context in which you're doing this, and I ask about what you wanted to learn. And if I would really coach you now, I would actually ask a bit further questions. I would ask questions like, when are you happy with the session? What would you have accomplished? What will you do differently in the world? And those questions help me to get the scale in the picture. Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah. This is like, I mean, number one, it comes very naturally to me. Number two is like, oh yeah, that's a missing piece.
Yeah, for me, what I did with nonviolent communication was really be emotionally supportive and help work through emotional stuff and teach some skill along the way. But I never bothered to start with, what do you want to achieve this session? What is useful for you? Yeah. If it's an hour from now, what are you happy to leave with? And this is such a huge, it's what they say, a critical success factor. Without this factor, it's bound to get, everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So the third one, and this is what really makes coaching, is called ownership, which means it's both kind of an energy dimension. So in this call, I'm talking a lot. So I'm kind of, not coaching you because I'm dropping knowledge. In a coaching call, you would actually, I want to have you working, you kind of crunching the numbers in your head or figuring things out or reflecting. And this requires often some kind of constraint in yourself to not give advice or not fix it or not solve it for the person, but really ask yourself, why can't this person solve it on his own? And what questions or what kind of thought-provoking things you need to say to get him think and see differently. Often it's also a question about if somebody is complaining, like it's really about like ownership in this sense, like, what's in your power to change the situation about, and really activating it this way. Yeah. And then the fourth one is what they call the iceberg. And that's the metaphor. It's, I think, a common metaphor, like above the waterline, you see the visible behaviors, and below there are all the thoughts and feelings and needs and values. And this is what normal coaches often do. They really dive deep in this iceberg and they really ask the soul questions. What I personally really enjoyed learning was this. Often at the professional context, people talk about results. And I had no way to link this towards the more kind of personal nonviolent communication stuff I knew. And so what I learned, kind of the key word is kind of competencies here. So a competency is what they would say is a description of behavior that allows you to be successful. So when somebody comes to me and says, like especially in business domain, like, our company needs to make more sales because otherwise we're not going to make it. It's really a result kind of question. It's hard for me to actually coach on this person on it. So the first thing I need to do is translate results to behavior. Like, okay, what behaviors will allow you to be more, sell more stuff? And this is a different kind of advice than giving business advice on, what's the business model canvas and how are you going to do that? And coaching is often really more about the personal and professional growth, as I learned it. And I like the trick of connecting results to behaviors, and from there working with the person what he needs to learn. And then the final one is they call the here and now. And it actually is a bit of it's everything about the interaction happening as it is right now. So there's a coach, there's a coachee, and what you often see, it's more from the therapeutic areas, it's like this microcosmos of what's happening here is likely to happen over there as well. And there's this cool move you can do. Let me see. And this is the move. So as a coach, you're observing the interaction. That's the first step. So if I would do it now, like I'm talking very fast, you know, and then if my learning question, my skill would be, hey, how do I convince people? You might make a comment, hey, Mark, you're speaking very fast and you want to learn how to convince people. How will this be in the context? Is it happening there as well? Could this be that people have trouble following you? And I was like, oh yeah. And it would expand my awareness beyond my current stories and thoughts. And this is really powerful as a coach if you can introduce a new perspective, not because of your superior knowledge or your expertise, it's also nice, but because there's something happening here that with mindfulness you can spot and see and expand kind of the world of a coachee. So this is for me really the magical part of coaching. If you can do this properly, you can really offer new insights and perspectives as a coach. So basically all these 5 things come together in a coaching conversation. And what's interesting as well is with the iceberg and the context, they're both in a ways like systems thinking, like what's my relation with the outside and what's my relation with the inside. And as a coach, you can explore both. And what's always nice to do, I find, is to figure out this person. Is it an iceberg person? Is it talking a lot about his own thoughts and feelings and needs? That might be interesting to explore. But what about the world? I mean, if I'm very stressed, like, I need to be more mindful and more calm. And I would like ask questions about, but what about the context? Is the boss giving you kind of crazy orders? Perhaps you can just change the context for yourself rather than go all iceberg and do some meditation or mindfulness stuff. And the other way around. If somebody's only complaining about my boss is just too strict for me, giving these crazy orders, I can't keep up. And I would ask to the iceberg, like, hey, what about you then? And how can you get more resilient in this, these demands? Yeah. So these are these 5 factors. Anything you like to, how is it for you to hear?
It feels useful. There's parts of this where I feel, it is part of my competence. It's something that spontaneously comes up. So the contextual thing, absolutely. The here and now, like I kind of interpret that. I bring my own interpretation, which is, I mean, you were talking about how you can observe the microcosm interaction that we're having in this moment, and then kind of invite them, bring a new perspective so they maybe see how this interaction relates to their goals. That's a new way to think about it for me. What I was just bringing was just that I have a pretty strong belief in the efficacy of presence, of just actually being there with someone and giving a wholehearted, non-defensive attention to them. That often that has a kind of, it's kind of like free energy in there somehow, just by being heard, just by being understood. It's like, oh, I feel better. I'm more motivated somehow. Like it seems really easy. So that comes naturally to me. The iceberg stuff, I've done also a bit of NVC things. So I'm familiar with these ways of kind of like stepping up and down, like can we go a bit lower? The ownership thing is interesting because of my experience with like co-ops and, decentralized organizations, I get this thing of, what's within your power to change and amplifying that. The one piece though, that is a bit cloudy is the boundary between coaching and teaching, or coaching and advising.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need advice from me.
Yeah, exactly. So what I got from your kind of context was like, you might do a mix of teaching, mentoring, and coaching, right? And you could say, if you call yourself coach as a job, you might include a piece of advice and teaching as well. Like people are calling themselves coach and doing that. Like there's no kind of official agreement on what a coaching job title should be. And you see often crossovers. I mean, from my industries like agile coaches, they really have some knowledge about how to organize workflows and how to be more agile, blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, they call themselves a coach, and it's about learning others, getting themselves unstuck with their problems. So yeah, I get it's cloudy. And there's like this vision part, like, oh, everybody should be empowered and take ownership, and you can skip this part and throw it out if you don't like it. But this is really more about the dynamic of the interaction during a coaching conversation as well. So for a coachee to really boost the learning ability, it's good that the coachee gets to kind of actually learn in the session and to kind of work on that. So, and I think what you often see is, when I give advice, is that I'm excited about something, I give advice, but it doesn't really connect. And somewhere along the way, the light bulb turns off, and it's like there's this disconnect and disengagement.
Yep.
That's the part in the interaction that you need to want to be careful of for to make sure. Yeah. It's
really that's a risk. I think it's a significant risk, because I'm just really excited about stuff. And when I was actually in high school, we had this concept of the Punisher, and the Punisher is someone who's just like so full of energy for talking about their topic that it feels like you're being attacked because they're sharing so much about it. You're like, oh God, I feel punished.
Yeah.
And I can easily be a Punisher, because I've just got like a huge amount of enthusiasm and fascination and like tons of topics to talk about.
Yeah.
And that is, it's like there's some value in there. There is something that people are coming for, which like they've told me is, oh, I just like to hear your perspective. I know you've got connections to stuff that I don't have. I want to hear your way of thinking, but it still needs to be moderated so that it's like a seasoning rather than the main dish.
Yeah. And I think every coach will recognize, the professional coaches, like this ownership thing is mainly about restraining yourself. Like people get excited, imagine solutions, want to give advice, and then to really be in a way like humble and more on the present side of things. Like, I'll just listen and support you where you are, and only if you 3 times ask me for advice, then I will give some, rather than dropping it immediately.
Okay, this is something that I discovered. The last conversation that I had like this, where I was asking an experienced coach for their way of thinking, the first thing they said was the question. Same as you. Like, if there's no question, who knows what the conversation is going to be like? It's likely to be lost. And then the last thing they said was, we were inquiring into this advice giving instinct. And it was basically what I discovered was, when someone is describing a difficult situation that they're in, I don't want to empathize with that. I don't want to feel a negative emotion. And so to defend against those feelings, I'll move into fix it mode. But, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, no problem. We don't have to dwell in that discomfort. And that's my own shit. That's my own unwillingness to experience emotion. And from that perspective, I don't think I'm going to be super helpful. I don't think I'm going to be as helpful as I could be if I could just first arrive with them in the moment that they're having, and be like, okay, this sounds really hard. This sucks.
Yeah, definitely. I recognize what you're saying. And that's, I think, the beauty of coaching, that it really requires, as you yourself are the instrument, if I bring my own shit in this, it will kind of, not work as effectively as it could. And what's a useful kind of guideline is, as well, is you only need to go as deep in the iceberg as you need to go to fix this problem. So if somebody is kind of in a negative mood, and his question is like, I just want, to move on and get some results, then it might perfectly fit to give the answers. If there's like a deeper question, like, this is a recurring theme in my life, I can't just get help from everybody every week, I want to do this myself, and then it's kind of more warranted to kind of dive deeper, acknowledge the negative emotions, and more work with that. Yeah.
And this also reminds me that I want to clarify the boundaries of what I help people with, because I've got some expertise in the domain, and I'm developing the skill of being a good listener, being a supportive coach. But I'm not very equipped to do psychotherapy, like that's really not, it's not my training, and I'm not even that interested in it. But often like you said, that like it's tempting to psychoanalyze people.
Yeah, definitely.
But I know how many crap therapists that I've seen and how few good ones I've seen. Like it's a really difficult skill to do it well and do it safely. And I don't want to pretend like I know how to do it.
Yeah.
Even though the temptation is there.
Yeah. And this is what they call ethical standards of coaching, to kind of know when it's out of your domain and when you have to kind of refer to somebody else. And it's so in general, what you do in a kind of coaching journey is like, first you inform, this is what you're going to expect from me, this is coaching, I'll help you learn, you find your own answers. And then you have this contracting phase where it's about what is your learning objective and how can you help. So naturally, first you're going to explore and analyze a bit of this person's life. It can be both context and iceberg. And then you're going to start like, okay, I can, it can happen in one conversation, or you can do it in multiple ones. You're figuring out, okay, it seems this person, what he's not seeing or he's stuck at is, the manager was complaining about lazy employees and giving all these instructions. And then employees thinking, well, I better lay down because before I know it, my boss will give me another instruction. That's really about exploration and analysis. And then you get some ideas like, okay, so this manager has to make a leap of faith in not giving instructions, letting him run things a bit kind of crazy or wild. And then this will give the space for the employees to pick up the the torch and kind of take more ownership or more responsibility. And then you're going to design some intervention, like how you're going to enable the teaching, the learning of this. And you might even spot in the conversation itself that the boss is kind of telling you what to do. And you can use this like, if you tell me how to do my coaching, I won't be able to help you as much and to, step up. This is happening as well with your employees. And then after the end, you evaluate and you come back with saying, hey, we have some sessions now. Did things change? Do you get different feedback from your surroundings? So this is basically, if you do it as a profession, it often takes 3 or 8 sessions. I think there was some research saying that if it doesn't really get anywhere in 3 sessions, it will get nowhere, like in the end. And after 8 sessions, it tends to get drizzle a bit, so it's best to end it. Which is not to say somebody can do 2 kind of questions with you and come back, but for one kind of issue, that's the guideline there. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I'm really familiar with, the kind of agile Scrum way of doing things, of like defining your iterative cycle, say what's the goal at the front, and then at the end evaluate how you performed, and having that structured reflection.
Yeah.
I just really believe in it. Like it's really effective. So this makes sense. And also from a business model perspective, I noticed how much more secure I feel when I sell a package of 5 or 6 calls rather than one at a time. Because if it's one at a time, there's this kind of like pressure that every step along the way has to feel really clean and valuable, and then otherwise they might not come back. But when it's like, no, we've got this engagement over a period of weeks, it's kind of like we'll evaluate the whole thing as a package rather than each step, which feels a lot more secure, and therefore I'm more relaxed and more available and less kind of like second guessing myself.
Yeah, that definitely sounds a good idea. What also might be useful is so like a really basic conversation framework. So you have these 5 factors to kind of course correct, but how to structure a conversation. One of the acronyms that they use is GROW, which stands for goal, reality, options, and will. And I've pictured it here. The goal is about, you start with the skill, the coaching question. What do you want to learn? Where are you now on this? How does the desired future look like? So explore that a bit. And then you get back to reality. That's the R from reality. and you're exploring the iceberg in the context, like what's happening around you and inside you, where might the trouble be. Then you go explore options, like what's possible for you, or this can be. You can also have some intervention, like you challenge limiting beliefs, or you do an exercise in. There's this thing that's often used, like the circle of influence and the circle of how do you say it in English?
Is it the circle of concern?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, from Covey. I think it's from Covey. The one of concern, indeed, one of influence, and you kind of do post-its on both circles, and you try to pull things from concern to influence. And you have many tricks and tools and techniques to ask questions, or little exercises you can do to explore the options. And then the final one is will, which is about designing actions together. Often as a coach, you want to end with some homework. So you're going to ask, what are you going to do differently? What I really love is observation homework. So if somebody is struggling with, lazy employees or with stress, it's really good to just monitor yourself. Like, when is stress high? When are people lazy? And when are they not lazy? And the will is also about ownership. So you see the little guy here. It's about, when it's nice somebody comes to you for help and advice. And the will, it really shows about how committed they really are to fixing their own problems, or whether they're asking you to actually solve it for them, which is, of course, fine, but it's a different kind of skill, different kind of conversation. And you would be a consultant in an organization or in somebody's life to actually fix stuff. So, I think this grow is really kind of helpful if you just it will happen naturally, I think, in a conversation, but it's good to just think about, these are indeed, you start and end with the scale, and in between you figure out what you can do.
I can imagine this almost running in fractal loops as well, that this is for a 1 hour conversation, but it's also for a journey.
Yeah, and it's also with scale, it's about, there are many scales. Like, I as a coach have a scale, when did I do a good job? And it's about boosting the learning ability. So if I have a conversation in such a way the person is able to learn better, I did a good job. It might be that the person still didn't learn it or is struggling with his life. That's not really my job to fix that. It's my job to help him learn. But for the coachee, it might be, well, I want to get the learning objective. And that's for the entire journey. But for one session, it might be, well, I'm happy to get more insight in my problem. So I'm just having this learning question, I'm stressed, what to do. And then as coach, you can make the contract and begin a conversation. This is the first call. We're going to explore a bit. So what would you like to learn? That's the ownership. And perhaps you don't really know because coaching is new. You say, well, I can offer you some insight in what's happening, and I'll come back to you with a little plan on how we're going to do that. So then you have a scale for one session.
This makes sense.
And also interesting is like the scale of the organization. So there's often the context, and they might have a different scale. Like a classic one also is like, I got coaching because I'm underperforming. My boss, they ordered me coaching. And then you can go, in the iceberg, like, oh, are you insecure? What skills are you lacking? We can also ask, like, what's the scale of your boss? I mean, how is he evaluating you? And does it match with your scale? And perhaps he's, opens a new dimension. And this is more kind of systemic coaching, where you look at the system rather than the psychology coaching, where you look in the person.
There's someone I'm working with at the moment, and I think their main challenge is essentially that the organization has multiple scales. There's different objectives, and they're kind of in competition with each other in a way. And she has her own objectives.
Yeah.
And there's kind of like one of her objectives very closely matches one of the organization ones. But her fear is that she's going to get pulled into the other one, which she's not interested in. And so there's this kind of like negotiation that's got to happen. I mean, first there's, I think, the clarifying stage of her actually understanding precisely what's her intention, what she's trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And then there's, I think, going to have to be a negotiation with the organization to say, like, there's a risk here that I get pulled off where my gifts are, into this thing, which is not so important, and how we're going to manage that. And that's going to be a shared responsibility, not just on her.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, so what you're doing now is I'm mapping it out is you're involving the context and mapping it out. That will be in the exploratory analysis phase of coaching. And then based on that, you can design some interventions. And if you would be like advising, you would say, try this and that, have this conversation. If you'd be coaching, you would ask them like, so seeing all these tensions come at you, what can you do to, navigate this? And then you would have people think of their own solution. So like, oh, perhaps I can talk to the manager and bring this in and, share that I might lose my gifts this way. And you also see an interesting between the iceberg and the context, which means she tries to fix it in the context first. And if that fails, you need to have coping, right? So first you try to make a better world. If that's not possible, you fall back on the coping skills. And then it's like, nobody will listen, nobody understands how to keep my gifts while being pulled at the wrong direction. And this way, the coaching question evolves as well. So you have this journey with somebody, starting out with, hey, I'm not at my place at work, what's happening? Towards perhaps it's about these competing scales. Let's try to fix it in the organization. Towards even further in like, well, it's always going to be messy, and how to deal with the mess from a more iceberg way. And you often see the question people come in with is not the real question they have. And I'm sure that's something you recognize or not.
This is a challenge. I mean, because I spend more time teaching and offering trainings, and people know that's what they're up for. And we kind of want to give them a menu of these are the different lessons that we can go into. What would you like to learn? But they always pick the wrong things.
Yeah.
Because if they knew which ones to pick, then they wouldn't need us. There's a bunch of stuff that they're avoiding or that they don't know. They've got the unknown unknowns, and we've got enough experience to recognize the patterns and say like, you're not actually going to reach your goal unless you address this topic over here. So we have to not really give them too many options and say like, you're going to take this whole package, and then at the end we'll evaluate.
Yeah, and this I think is a perfect analogy with coaching, because it holds the same way. Somebody comes to you with a learning question and they're stuck with it. Otherwise, they could fix it themselves and wouldn't need a coach. So it requires your expertise, and it's often some domain knowledge about the organization or troubles they're having to have them, And here's like the trick part, because same with the trainings, people want to have some autonomy and choose their own kind of lesson they want to learn at the one hand. At the other one, you're the expert, having seen the patterns. As a coach, you would know it about learning, about the personal stuff. As a trainer, you know it about perhaps the organization stuff. So how do you get somebody from who is here to over there without losing too much ownership? Because if you're imposing from an advising, like you should do this and that, I know what's best for you, it's tricky. So it's really an art in navigating this tension between, as a coach, you know how to guide learning journeys, you have seen stuff, you know how these things work. At the same time, the coachee is in charge, he's taking the lead, and he needs to actually be guided in the learning journey towards the deeper insights of perhaps it is this. And what I notice in myself is I need to be humble at all times. So if I'm really sure like this is the issue, then it gets tricky. So I really need to be open to surprises. Otherwise, I'll be a coach with a secret agenda pushing it on people, because I know how to fix them secretly.
This is a risk for me.
Yeah,
it's a big risk. I'm always convinced of my own brilliance, and I need some intentional practices to interrupt that reality and go, you know what, like I've got some brilliance, but it's only a piece of the puzzle, and that other people also have brilliance. So I actually do that intentionally as a practice. Like in Inspiral, I'm in a working group at the moment, which is doing some governance design work for the network, just kind of high level strategy stuff, governance stuff. And I put this energy into like building a really well-designed proposal, like really clean, like this does all this clever stuff and it's so elegant. And I was really full of myself about how good it was until I brought it to the working group, and they broke it down to pieces and were like, questioned basically every step along the way. And it's like, they're actually right. Just because it's coherent and elegant and has this kind of like prestige about like, oh, didn't I do a nice tidy job? It's like, doesn't mean it's right. And actually I was missing so many pieces, and what they came up with in the space of 30 minutes of talking about it was like, not so elegant as like a coherent picture, but actually way more likely to work. And I need that constant reminder, because I always get high on my own ego, thinking like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm brilliant now. Like I was learning then, but now I'm brilliant, you know?
I think it touches me on like the organizational, the work I'm doing. Like it's so tempting to kind of design the perfect machine, or so, like it is for me. Like I'm history in software development, so I have a history of actually I can program a computer to do what I want, and if it's a brilliant idea, it does what I want and it works. And this is not how people work. So yeah.
That's the same for me. Very, very, very similar. And again, it comes to this thing of like, I don't want to experience the discomfort of ambiguity, the discomfort of feeling responsible for a context where someone's not having a great experience. But actually, I can just experience those things. It's okay. Like, this is ambiguous. This is uncertain. This is messy. That person got hurt. Like, those things are all okay. It's not the end of the world, but I can easily overreact to that.
And this is, I think, so what makes coaching a skill or a science is like these 5 factors and some kind of models and how to steps and the questions to ask. And what makes coaching an art is you're your own instrument, and the more kind of personal work you're doing yourself, the better tuned you are, I think. And what I find helpful is to have this framework because I was good on the iceberg stuff, on the emotional processing stuff, but I was less good on the ownership. So I can also evaluate on myself, like what part of me needs the tuning to be a better coach. Another one I personally have some trouble with sometimes, it's like in the here and now, it's like the interaction. It's about the presence part and the mindful part. It's also about really practical. Am I able to connect with you? Am I able to understand your learning style? Are you a visual thinker, or are you a doer or reflector or thinker? Can I match that? If you make comments now, do I respond to those, or am I kind of in my own world a bit? And I can have an amazing iceberg stuff, amazing analysis with systems thinking, but if I lack this kind of connection and this ownership because I'm advising, I'll still be a bad coach.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, was what's where you are on your learning journey, and like what's in front of you. Do you have is there any intentional plans to develop in those areas? Like, have you got an intentional scale?
So where I'm at, so let's have a little coaching thing. This is a good exercise to do, like a formula you can use. And it starts with the first question. It's like a scale. You have a scale from 1 to 10. First question, how is it now? I would say, as a coach, like I might be a 6 or 7. Like it's just it's enough. It's enough. And why didn't I answer 0? So what got me to the 6? I think last year I learned a lot of these foundational things about contracting, about getting the question clear, about my tendency for perhaps fixing it rather than focusing on the learning itself. That really, just having the simple guidance on this fixed a lot of issues, which made me from having a good conversation towards really coaching. But my dream would be, so that's the another question, like if I would be much more able to, I think ownership is one. So to really have the other person kind of sweat a bit. And it might also require for me to be a bit more confronting. I tend to be conflict avoidant and to be compassionate and understanding. And it has its place, but it's also good to challenge a bit. And the here and now part of actually doing that a lot more, using interaction as a kind of microcosmos, as well as what I just said before, having this connection really good, to really honor a person's wisdom rather than to impose my own. Yeah. So, and then another question is, did I achieve earlier success and other times or circumstances? I would say yes. As a nonviolent communication trainer and coach, I find it a lot easier to be, a good coach. I would be easily an 8, I think. And that's because I'm much more comfortable with the domain of emotions and compassion and mindfulness than and at professional work. That just gets my ratio churning, like I fix it, rather than this emotion part where I'm much more used to be present and to really dive deep in the iceberg and to really hold space. So what I can learn from this is how to become a better coach at work using this early successes, in a way, get more comfortable with the emotions and the iceberg, and just kind of use this nonviolent skills of presence to bring in my coaching. So next step I can take is, well, I'm actually practicing simple things like when I explain an exercise, I have to do it really slow, one step at a time. I'm a fast speaker, I can just dump it all. And I see you nodding your head a lot, so I know I have your attention, but a lot of people will lose me along the way. So a simple thing is fix the interaction in the here and now. Be slow on my introduction of exercises. Double check if somebody really wants to learn this. Those kind of things. Yeah. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, this is golden. This is really useful. I was reflecting as well on what you said basically about speaking quickly. I noticed you said that earlier, and reflecting on my own habit as well. I'll often speak very quickly and very high pitched as well. That's like another symbol for myself of like, okay, you're losing presence, and I've noticed that some of the best conversations, my partner recently got me this tablet for taking notes. And so it's given me permission in conversation to just take a little longer before I respond, because I'm just kind of like writing a note about what you said. And it's my impression is that it's not awkward. Like if you know that I'm writing notes, it's not awkward to wait 20 seconds for my reply. And just leaving that empty space seems to help with the ownership and both with the emotional attunement as well. And it gives me, it's like this thing has given me a sense of permission of like, I can just pause. I don't have to do anything. And then new possibilities arise in that pause, whether it's I've got something to say or more often you'll take the space.
Yeah.
So I was just reflecting on that for myself, and I don't know, maybe that will have some resonance with you too.
Yeah. I just remember that it was one of the things. So what I do in preparation for session is like look at myself as a coach, what I want to learn to be a better coach, and I write down 1 or 2 things I just want to pay attention to, and this is one of them. Like, can I be more silent and just slow down the pace? Just so I'm doing it now, and slow it down. And I recognize as well, like I've slept not so good the last few days. My wife was running errands, was a bit late, so I was rushing to this meeting because I was with the kids. So it's really for me a sign that I lack some presence, and how to ground myself in that.
You're forgiven.
Thanks. and here again, I see like a choice between the iceberg and the context. I can go all deep and like, whoa, how to be more grounded and how to be more present. And I can just be practical and say like, okay, so just, add a pause, just slow down the tempo a little bit. Yeah,
it's both, right? I mean, I've just recently added a 15-minute buffer to all of my meetings so that I always have at least 15 minutes to put down my thoughts or get prepped for the next thing.
Yeah.
And it's obvious, and it's a context, and it's just like a basic pragmatic fix. But, and same like with the example of the tablet, that's just like a change in my environment that has changed my behavior. But you could have given me the tablet 6 months ago and I wouldn't have picked up that lesson, like there's something internal that's happening as well. And that's like there are different factors that can create some kind of positive change. And I don't think I ever know which one is going to be the right one. It's sort of having a variety of tools to try and go like, does this suit the moment? And because of that variety and optionality, that's why I can feel a bit lost sometimes. Like, I'm just improvising, I'm just being spontaneous, and sometimes it seems to work. But yeah, that's part of my learning journey at the moment, is actually being a little bit more coherent about what are these, when I say I'm being spontaneous, what actually am I doing? What are some of the options that I tend to lean on? And are there gaps? And I think this stack of 5 principles, these foundational pieces, that helps to see the gaps. Like, it's just really obvious in reflection that I haven't zoomed in on people's scale and got them to just articulate their goal. Very closely related to the learning question. And that's really easy. Like there's a whole conversation there to have that's just really easy, and it's all on them. And I don't have to do anything apart from say, so what are you trying to achieve? Oh, you're complaining again. Tell me what, tell me the positive version. Like that's very easy to do and very helpful.
Yeah. And also nice ones.
Me too.
Nice ones are also, how will others notice that you have changed? That's like a context question, which you have also the future ones, like imagine it's 5 years from now, what will you do differently? That's a famous one. You have indeed the behavior question, what will you do differently? Not what is differently in your world, but what actually is differently. And what's helpful is, you can have the iceberg and you can divide it in 3 layers, the behaviors, thoughts and feelings, and then low ones like personality or drivers or needs. And you make 2 of them. What is it now? And you just explore, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? You write it down. And then it's like, what would you like to feel and think and do?
Nice. And
then it gives you basic kind of point A, point B scale to work on. What I learned in my course was a quite complicated one, which involved the 2 icebergs I just mentioned, then exploring the context and find the interaction with this iceberg. And so they would really, this education was about systems coaching as well. So they really teach about noticing these loops, feedback loops with surroundings, and then intervening on that. So if I would be a boss, I could say, yes, I'll be less instructive to make my employees take more responsibility, but that would require a change as well in their surroundings. Employees at first will have some pushback because they expect the old behavior. And this analysis as well is what they include. So they learn, as a coach, you have an intake conversation, which you clarify the coaching question, the initial one. You map out the context, map out the iceberg, and you analyze this on the feedback loops. And this is like, what you start with. You have a analysis of current desired situation, the feedback loop with the context, a coaching question and a scale, and then you're going to go home and you're going to think about what can I help this person with. And you're if you work with the methodological, you would think about, okay, this person is complaining a lot. I might use Covey's circle of influence, circle of care to get more awareness about what he can do. Or you would say, okay, this person has different ideas about his role in the organization than the other one. Let's do an organizational role analysis, which involves asking how this person sees the role, and then inviting a perspective shift. How does your boss see your role? What does the company manual describe your function as? And then compare the 2. And these are things you could improvise, right? I mean, this is rocket science, but it's good to do this consciously and write down. And the way I do it is to have like a list of ideas, because that's the improvising part. You never know how you're going to help this person. So I'll make a list of interventions, like I have 3 things to try. And during the conversation, I'll just, see which one is hitting home and which one is not connecting. and I like it for myself to have like a context one. What can you change in the world? An iceberg one. What can you change inside? But this really depends on of course the coaching situation.
Yeah, I'm seeing as well the value of the training that you went through, right? Like, it's not just the big picture, which is kind of easy. I feel like pretty easy for me to grab. It's also there's each of these pieces. Yeah, I just know what it's like to have a good process, a good map, a good canvas, or something that you just kind of throw it in front of people, and the instructions are really clear, and they do go, okay, I'm just going to go through these steps.
Yeah.
And then like, wow, I did the steps and now I've got insight. You know, I know that kind of it's almost like a sausage factory or something. You know, you just like turn the handle and insight comes out when you've got the right canvas for the job.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, so I come from, I think, the same, like I improvised a lot of it and I felt lost in improvising. And I think the course didn't learn me to be a masterful coach. I think that's what I did in the personal growth and the nonviolent communication. And it's in some way, it wasn't kind of coming out because I lacked the kind of the framework. And this education, they just learned me, make your analysis, analyze the 5 factors, think of some intervention you're going to do, and just really taking the time to do this. Really kind of like I feel like a school kid, you know, teacher says, now first make the analysis, write down the interventions, reflect on the 5 key factors. Okay, but I do it. I write it down and it helps and it makes me much more organized and yeah.
Yeah.
And I see other people learning coaching and they grasp the map if it's their kind of the holy grail and they get stuck. They're not going to be masterful because they're so rigid in their, I need to know the skill before I move on.
There's no risk of me doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm much more biased towards chaos rather than overstructure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a big takeaway for me in this conversation. There's some specific pieces. I mean, I just copied down most of your slides because I thought they were useful. But the big obvious one is for me to do my own intention setting beforehand. I'm really good on the follow-up, but actually it's the prep that makes the difference to the conversation. Yeah. Just spend half an hour getting my thoughts together before they arrive and really, like you say, go through these 5 steps and just give them a little bit of thought, maybe write some options down. Yeah. And I can pick out more of these kind of tools that you're giving. I'm going to do some online trainings and stuff, and I'm sure there's tons of material out there, but it's really the practice that works for me. Yeah, and what really helped me, and I think will help you as well, is just start with the scale. To really spend some time to really get clear on what is it you want to learn or achieve here, because that gives so much direction and as a proper coach. So if this will be a coaching conversation, I see the hours like almost past. I would end with kind of 3 questions. It's about the product, the process, and feedback. So I would ask you, coaching is about boosting your learning ability. What have you learned? And what you said to me, your takeaways. Then I would ask, how did you learn this? How did we do this conversation? And I would end with, do you have any feedback for me, things I can improve or I did well? And this is the way, like you said, you want to download coaching. So did we succeed in this? Let me think. Yeah. I definitely learned a bunch. I told you one thing, but I've also got tons of notes. How did I learn this? Somehow from the brief interactions we'd had on Twitter, I trusted your credibility to have something useful to tell me. And I showed up ready to learn and ready to just take on board what you had to say. And I appreciated the graphics as you were sharing them, and I was copying them down and kind of doing a split brain thing of listening to you speak, writing, just copying, and also thinking about how does this apply to the people that I'm working with. So I got my brain very busy. Like you said, the ownership thing is my brain is supposed to be crunching. It was crunching. Okay. And feedback. I mean, I don't know how to give you feedback if I don't know what your goals are. So
Yeah.
I'm happy. I feel satisfied. That's the easy feedback.
That's the feedback. Yeah. Yeah, and if I would reflect on myself, and this isn't official, like a coaching conversation, I would say my sticking point is really the here and now and the interaction, and being not super present today. My worry would be that I lost you at some times, and I hear that like you were doing split brain thing, and I'm happy that it's you got the brain crunching, but for me I would be a bit worried like, oh, I can improve this, I can connect better with you, and what I had my intention of the session was to really like work with you have, and I ended up more rambling than I liked, and I think this for me is an opportunity to connect more like how are you going to apply this in life, and to really brainstorm together about this, rather than me spinning the the knowledge and you doing it in the background separate from me. So that's what I would reflect on, how I would reflect on this session, how I would improve this.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'll report back. I'll let you know after I've had a few more coaching conversations to see what of the stuff has really stuck and made a difference.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that feedback.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. I really appreciate it. From the moment you offered, I was just like, yes, great, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. I really love just speaking about stuff I learned, and like sharing that. I got a lot of excitement for that. And I also love speaking to you. And I think I met you from, I didn't met you, I met your online presence. I think from the book of Decentralized Organization Patterns. I think I read it a few years ago, and I was like, this is really helping me figure some stuff out in my organization right now. And then I decided, I think 1 or 2 years ago, to get on Twitter, and somehow you tweet a lot and you got on my feed a lot. I was like, oh, I like the interaction. And I have also this, it sounds like an amazing organization, the Spiral, and the work you're doing. So I was figuring I'd like to know more about this. And so for me, it's nice to meet you.
Oh, great. Maybe in a future conversation, we can talk more about Inspiral if you like.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I love to talk about it.
Great.